Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Genesis Block. Today we're joined by Adam Helfgott, who is the founder of Valence, which is a data infrastructure company. And yeah, before we get started and introduce Adam and Valence and all the cool things they're doing, just a bit of a recap on Genesis Block. So yeah, we haven't been with you in a little while, but yeah, this is another episode in our interview series where we interview founders, investors, and operators from across the Web3 space and try to understand what motivates them, what their products are all about, what their histories are, why they're into the space, and just learn a little bit about them and the companies that they've founded and are working on. And yeah, in general, great to have you here in the podcast, Adam, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ed. I'm super grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. So yeah, I think just to kick it off, can you start by telling us a bit about your background, your journey as an entrepreneur, and leading up to the founding of Valence?
Sure. So yeah, I've been founding companies since I guess I'm in the second generation now. Yeah, like first company I started in 1999. I was like photo news and email for summer camps, and I kind of learned a bunch of things from that. Wound up selling that company, but the number one thing I learned from that is it's if you can avoid it, don't pick small markets, even though the products are really cool. But that was a really great learning experience for me there. And from then on, built a few other companies, one in fashion tech called lookbooks.com, another smaller market, but larger than summer camp. And that was a lot of fun too. And it was around the middle of that company, I guess, when, I saw, a Reddit post about Bitcoin back in, first, 100 days of the token. And the technology behind it really caught my eye. But I was like so busy building my company, I didn't really have the time to go set up miners and do all that kind of stuff. Just I was like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. And I wish I did it that day, of course. But it stuck with me and just been kind of been playing around, since the really early days. And actually I learned about trading. Didn't learn on the stock market first. I learned in the crypto markets first. And it was really, in writing code and arbitraging between all the exchanges and things like that. And, it was a real interesting, fun time that, went by really quick. And after selling lookbooks, I wanted to build a company that incorporated this new database technology, the distributed ledger. And and before that, I got to work as a consultant at a bunch of firms that are still in play now, and it was right around the time of the Ethereum ICO and things like that. And I just remember these conversations oh, do we build on this new thing ETH or use one of these other things and things like that. And yeah, it was just so different, but also so the same.
Yep.
Of this basically of a technology that's really, really promising. But the use cases to actually leverage what a public mainnet is aren't quite there yet from a society point of view yet. Culture hasn't quite moved there. And I think in this post-COVID world we're in, I think we're approaching those times. And and that's where so I built an ad tech company called MadHive, and initially the ideas was to kind of redefine the ad tech ecosystem with using blockchain to reduce fraud and this and that and all these kind of things. And the biggest learning from that is major enterprises, public companies aren't really ready to disrupt the whole entire supply chain, even with all the benefits, because of the momentum and 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of I guess bureaucracy and just all the players involved, moving those things to a new process is really, really hard. And so, at MadHive, we adopted a lot of the ideas in our internal technology that created great efficiency, but getting, major corporations and media networks to, do things on a tokenized network, not quite ready for that, just from a regulatory point of view. And that leads to what I'm working on now, which has taken a little while to kind of really tune the idea. But in all the companies I've built, have always been around kind of the idea of like a value attribution, right? Like if I generate a lead for Y and Y winds up not being able to use that lead, I still have a ton of data around that opportunity that could be used somewhere else. And there's really no really great markets for those types of opportunities, right? Like I can't, and a lot of that data just kind of goes to waste, and it just becomes a cost center in companies when it really could be a profit center. And there's really just no there. Well, with blockchain, there is a solution for understanding the provenance and data verification. And then there's really a lack of tooling on the value attribution side in a really, really simple way. And so what we're looking for at Valence are like markets and companies that are very, very large, that are very, very established, that have very, very high like competition in product development. So like healthcare, drug discovery, things like that is a really big major one where the things like bureaucracy and the stuff I mentioned in the past really don't apply because there's such high competition that if someone gets an edge, it'll be used because the payoffs are in the multi-billions, especially things like if I can speed up the time it takes for an FDA approval for a new drug, I might be able to beat out the patent time, and now a life-saving cure for some rare disease that wasn't being able to brought to market from a financial risk point of view can be brought and so those are the problems where in the technology we're looking to solve is that can we onboard data with our marketplace partners, like so it's basically we have like data partners in marketplaces that exchange large amounts of data, and there's a lot of data that isn't really in these networks now, like from a drug discovery point of view, there's all that stuff that are just lost on the kind of the cutting room floor because it's really hard to monetize it. We've like figured out a way to basically like to value the training data for machine learning models, and especially in the context of federated data networks, and allow the trading and transactions of very high fidelity, high quality data in a longitudinal way over time, and basically trade like enterprise value of the product being developed for access to that data from a supplier. And our product is simply the tool that allows an existing marketplace to do that, so they can onboard more data and facilitate more transactions. And so it's kind of like like what like PayPal is to like eBay. We're kind of like that for data networks, and to increase velocity.
So just to because that was great. That was quite a lot. So just to unpack a little bit of that. So
Yep.
before we go on to Valence a little bit more and try to break down some of those terms and some of what exactly you're trying to achieve with Valence, I think a question that I had as a follow up was a couple of things. So the first one would be just in your experience, what exactly drew you to the technology behind Bitcoin, right? Like to distributed ledger technology, to distributed systems. What about it excited you? Why did you think from the get-go that this was something that you thought was extremely promising and could revolutionize things? And secondly, you mentioned obviously a lot around how benefits can, there are a lot of benefits, but it's very difficult to align an ecosystem to actually realize those benefits due to entrenched interests, due to old ways of doing things. And personally, I've seen that quite a lot as well. In some of the areas that we're trying to disrupt, and wanted to get your perspective on what exactly were those issues that you saw, and how do you think ecosystems can get aligned to actually realize these benefits in a more harmonious way?
Sure. So answer your first question on like, why is Bitcoin great? Is this, is that, is the reading the white paper and understanding that the solving of the Byzantine, the Byzantine generals problem is fascinating, right? That
Yeah.
actually got done, and that we can like now have this like ledger that no one really controls. It took me years looking back to really understand the implications and how it works and like why it's important. I had the instinct it was important that like it's like every time there's a new database technology that gets invented, like the amount of products that get created once that is understood is pretty incredible. Like all throughout human history, before computers, and post the invention. And we have like the idea of SQL databases, gave us the modern internet. The idea of like key value store databases gave us the ability to have, like products like Instagram and, everything else that like basically, allow this like high speed access. And now, like having this distributed ledger technology is like, what products can be developed with that can't be developed, on a thing like a SQL and things like that. And generally, it's these trustless applications. We've been seeing the books and the blogs and everything that we've been doing for, many years now about like these, like permissionless and trustless and blah, blah, blah. But what does that actually mean in product? Like what, like of like, people using it, right? And so, I think like the Bitcoin as a a money transportation network, is amazing, and like I really believe in that something like that will be the future. Is like basically instant settlement at this very large scale, and I just like know in my heart that this technology is a breakthrough and it's important. How it gets implemented and when it gets implemented at some sort of scale that's outside of the speculative bubble that crypto is largely in, is up to like founders and risk takers actually like trying to push things out there, and with what's really interesting is that because of the decentralized nature is that it's it's like there's a lot of like hype around there the same way there was like the dot-com hype in the late 90s, early 2000s. That kind of is distributed in this like global scale at these like smaller levels, but there's a lot of like noise and there's a lot of money and that kind of like disrupts progress in a lot of ways. So it's like during these like kind of crypto winters when a lot of work gets done, and I know it's like a little bit of a cliche at this point in our third, fourth one that we're in, but it's really true. Like with people that really believe in the tech, that there really is no there's really no way to get rich quick right now, but like let's build, and like and that's when cool stuff happens. And what I've really seen in in building companies is that like if it's like that old Steve Jobs quote, if the product's not 10x better, it's not gonna no one's gonna adopt it, and so yeah, while many ideas have been using crypto behind the scenes that are like incrementally better than currently, it's not that much better where it's like worth changing everything, and maybe over time it will be, and I think these things are being implemented like slowly to a degree. But what I've seen is that many companies all have like a test budget to like implement, like some sort of crypto thing, so they can write the news article during a boom and get a bump in their stock price, wherever it is. But it really gets no traction beyond that. And, so it's, always been I've, like everything I've really done, I was like, always try not to get into the innovation buckets at these companies to try things, because that kind of just leads into a black hole of nothingness. And, and so like, let's build real things, so.
Cool. And yeah, no, I want to come back to that point later around people building in this market. And I think like it is a cliche, but it is actually true based on a lot of the things that I've been seeing as well. And I've been on this podcast as well, we're very real proponents of building products that people actually use and that actually improve things they're a step change improvement, right? So it'd be great later on to get your opinion on some of the cool things that you think have been built during this cycle, if you have any. But before we do that, I think it's let's turn to Valence and let's turn to some of the problems that Valence is solving. So you're saying so Valence is described as a data infrastructure company. So just trying to piece that out. What exactly does that mean? What is Valence attempting to do? And would you be able to describe Valence's model and business model as well to our listeners?
Yeah. So we're actually not trying to. I'm not trying to like rebuild something that currently exists. I'm trying to enable something that seems obvious that's been fairly impossible because of just it just hasn't been done yet at scale, and partly that's because technology like a mainnet hasn't really existed yet to like facilitate trust across large network of players. Technology up until past 5 years or so has been like too expensive to implement. But and product development at at major corporations that need massive amounts of high fidelity data to create products that consumers or businesses need. There hasn't been a need for that. Like it's like the bar has been pretty low to a degree for a long time. And I think we're at a point now, in business cycle, or I don't really know what the right word is, but essentially we're at a point now where like the demand for high quality products that are very, very high fidelity, that like are very personalized, is kind of here. And I think it's largely brought on by like the major internet corporations, like products like Instagram and all these things. We have these algorithms and news feeds. Everything's like customized and personalized to me. And yet like you go to like a healthcare provider, or you go to the aisle in a drugstore, and there's two options, right? Like, and this is just very simplistic. We're not trying to disrupt this industry exactly, but it's like I go into the store and I can buy children's Tylenol or adult Tylenol, and it doesn't matter how much I weigh, it doesn't matter anything like that. It's just like, and it's like, it would be like the same thing as like going into a shoe store and saying, okay, you can buy small or large, and like, and that's it, and
Yeah.
and the reality is we all have very different genomes. We have very different, expressions of those genomes based on the food we eat and exercise we do and things like that. And so all that data information, about who I am and what makes me me, is not really used in the decisioning today for like prescription medicine or even developing of drugs, and we believe in the future, it'd be highly profitable for a biotech company to use that information at scale in order to produce better products and create better profits for their shareholders. And and that like now is the time, and we see that happening. And you see companies like Pfizer and other ones like trying to create these like data aggregator plays where they can get a lot more consumer data. And the other interesting thing is for personalized medicine to get FDA approval, that's basically personalized on your genome, the amount of data required for FDA approval goes up by like 1,000x. It's
Okay.
like, it's if I'm testing a drug for like allele XYZ, now I need to test like a lot more data in order to like
Yeah.
prove the FDA that this is like that. And so the requirements for data are immense, but the access to clinical trial data to produce those things has not changed. And so there's an opportunity now to kind of, basically like build a mechanism to allow access to this data, which does exist. Like all this information is out there, it's just decentralized in places that are not aggregated yet. And so, Valence is basically building a network of networks where we can like value this data, not in the context of like how much money is this data worth, but what is the like this data. I have a question. I have a question for data sets across multiple data sets, and the contextual value of that data to that question might produce a different result from another question. And so if I'm asking the data for a whole bunch of people with this genome and with a whole bunch of other things, let's say they have like one of these things on and things like that, if I contextualize all that information together, and I might be able to get a footprint for a clinical trial study, just with a single query, and where I might have spent $500 million doing that myself, putting all together and taking 3 years to do it. Can I do it with a single query and offer that $500 million to the data network itself or the data producers, and creating great incentives to kind of get higher fidelity data to solve these problems? But the main problem is today is that would be done very, very by hand, and that doesn't scale. And so we're producing technology that basically allows the valuation of the data in the context of a question being asked, and then the pricing of that data happen inside existing data marketplaces to happen. We also believe that the future of these data networks are going to be in a federated model where the data can't leave like on-prem, and people don't want it to for privacy, HIPAA. There's regulatory for sharing that happen. There's really no technology that does that at scale yet. And so, we believe in the future, it'll be weird not to have data shared in this privacy compliant way. People will be opting out of that. And and it'll just be kind of normal as everything is kind of federated, and which is basically another, like Bitcoin is federated, if you think about it, right? In that way, we use a different word for it. And so, that's kind of what we see, is that we're building basically like an infrastructure element for these large data networks, to give incentive for to basically like put all your data into these networks in order to see if it's valuable on the other side. And that, like for a company, like one of the, like a Fitbit type company or any of those kind of things, there might be hundreds of millions of dollars of new revenue that is not realized, that they didn't even know is realized, by just plugging into these things in a privacy compliant way. And so
Okay.
that's
Perfect. Yeah. So I think there's quite a lot to dig in there as well. So yeah. So firstly, the question I would have is, where are you sourcing all of this data from? And when you're saying, it's held in these large data networks, how exactly are these data networks constructed in, so I'm assuming that they're constructed in a decentralized manner. So you have many different kinds of data networks that you tap into. How is that data held? Is it on-prem? Likely, and is it and also how do you maintain the privacy of that data? And I think I have a bit of an understanding of how you potentially do that, but I wanna hear it from you first, and then we can explore this a little bit more.
Sure. So, we've been developing a blockchain behind the scenes called Alice. That's essentially it's like the way I like to describe it is like, how do I like map like the reality onto a network as like high fidelity as possible. And that's a lot of it's like metadata, like the permissions and the way I think about it, and the way I think about the things, and memberships and things like that. So we have this like methodology for like mapping a large like control structure onto this like distributed network, this like tokenized network that we have, which is basically a big key value store with this like privacy layer, permission layer on top of it. That's it's very fast, and it's interesting how it all works. We're not storing the data ourselves. We're storing the information about how the data can be accessed and received and things like that. And we're tapping into existing data networks that exist and existing data stores. So we have connectors into Google Cloud, Azure, all those kind of things there. And then the existing data marketplaces that exist at an infrastructure level, whether it's like a Databricks or Snowflake or companies like that, where we're just sitting in those marketplaces. So like companies that are already using those things can just kind of click a button and kind of like valencify their data set and kind of make it available in a way while removing all the any PII type things and stuff like that. And we're looking at it mostly from a machine learning point of view, right? So for for training data, there's a whole another case as well in this an AI revolution we're in now as well. As companies are getting privy to the fact that their data is being scraped and used to produce large amounts of revenue in these AI models. There's two things that'll happen. One is a company like Reddit will do a deal with OpenAI and say, no, we're the only LLM that can scrape your data, and period, and that's it. And they'll pay $200 million a year for that. Or can there be a gate in front of that where all that data can be scraped, but then every time that questions are being asked of the models, if the Reddit data is actually influencing the answers of those things at a very high percentage, should a large amount of the revenue produced at the AI company go to Reddit, for example. And so our technology can essentially allow those types of high fidelity transactions to happen at scale. So that's kind of how we look at it.
And how exactly are those transactions enabled by Valence? And also, you mentioned that there's a privacy layer on top of the data. Do you mind diving a little bit more into how that works?
Yeah, I mean, it's behind the scenes. We use basically all the typical like building blocks in the crypto networks of basically all the privacy preserving features that are coming out there from the point of view of it's changing constantly internally, so I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but basically all the things that are in the existing crypto land that people use, we're using as well, whether it's like the ZK snark technology and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But I can send you guys a link afterwards of how
Yeah, that
we're
would be
actually doing
cool.
all
Yeah,
that.
no, just wanted to ask that because got experience in analyzing Ocean protocol and stuff as well. And I think Ocean's also a data marketplace, and it's got a component of where data can be accessed through confidential compute for to train specific AI models where you have private data that you don't want to give away, right? So I think that it kind of overlaps a little bit. Obviously, like
Yeah.
they haven't been able to do it at scale. And in my opinion, that model is kind of hamstrung a little bit by the fact that you have to use crypto tokens to access all of this stuff, which I don't think should be the case. And I think that the way to do it correctly is to actually make it as simple a user experience as possible, which is abstracting away all the token stuff, which you don't really need. Right. So there's a lot of crypto elements in how Ocean Protocol does it, but I think the overall idea is fantastic, right? Like you need a lot of data and a lot and the set of public data that you have available to train these AI models with is shrinking, and now these LLMs will only be improved by training them with specific with specific private data. And it's a win-win in both ways, right? If you're getting paid for the use of your data to train these models by some of these companies, for example. But yeah, like in that context, wanted to understand a little bit about how you guys are positioning yourselves.
Yeah. So again, we're not we're just this like valuation attribution mechanism that allows like to understand the context of the data involved in a query, right? And so we're building like query adapters, like basically where we're sitting like inside of the different machine learning models and things like that, where we kind of see the mechanics of things that are happening, so that we can then push this out, building out standards for this with other groups and partners of that on the healthcare side, so that there's like a systematic methodology that can be audited and things like that. We're not trying to like be the place where everybody uploads the data. We're more like kind of like it would be, like a company like what's it called, like like a New Relic or something like that that monitors data. That they're not trying to replace Google Cloud. They're just saying, let us tell you the health of your network in Google Cloud.
Yeah.
Or we're kind of like that. Like, what's the health
You're a
of your
framework
data?
for Yeah.
Exactly.
You're a framework for
And then
assessing these things.
assessing the thing, but also from a measurement point of view as well. So coming from like the TV, ad tech world, I kind of see us as like a New Relic plus Nielsen, for data, and that we're like we can measure the quality of your data over time, who's the audience, what happens, things like that, so that it could be like priced on the buy sell side appropriately to increase velocity of transactions. And
Yeah. So you're a foundational
so
layer in many of these marketplaces.
none of that's crypto, if you will, except our
Yeah.
underlying data structure is on a public mainnet, which doesn't need to be on a public mainnet. I just believe in 3 to 5 years at scale, if it's not on a public mainnet, there'll be a whole nother problem of getting people to wonder if the system's being gamed or not, and it needs to be able to be audited really, so.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of a no regrets tech choice essentially that you made, and that's brought you into this entire world. But essentially, so what I want to understand is then on top of so you're a foundation layer for actually valuing and attributing this data. How are so for example, if machine learning models need to be trained on this data, how do they find the data that is most suited for their purposes to be trained on? Like, for example, how do you search for this data? How do you know where it is? How do you access it?
It's a really good question, because that's not because and it's been hard. Like, so another thing I've learned, founding companies, is that like my prior MO is, let me keep as big, most optionality as possible, as like I figure out a business model, things like that. I can like pivot in any direction. And I'm taking a bet here that I'm very certain the world is going to like move in this direction, because I don't really see any other way. So I'm actually taking the approach here. Let me see how small I can like make our product and make it really, really like as like hardcore and as like best as possible, as fast as possible. And so we're actually not doing that part. What we're doing is doing tooling to companies that already do that. So there's a lot of like existing data marketplaces in the enterprise world, especially in healthcare, that already do that by hand, by algorithm, by other things, and like we're providing methodologies for them to like increase the velocity of their own discovery of that, so they can like run models on the data at large, then present opportunities to the buy side, saying, hey, like you can increase the confidence score of these questions if you like onboard this data. This is probably how much it's going to cost, and here's like the proof of that. And like we're just providing like the raw tooling to let other companies make money because we exist.
Yeah, so I guess like you're in a unique position in this case because if you're valuing and attributing the data, you kind of know what the data is and where it is. So you kind of have a database of data, if I could
Exactly. We're
put it
like a
like that.
network of networks.
Yeah,
Like behind the scenes, like that's kind of like our our investing pitch is that we're like we're building a network of networks here, that we could facilitate a marketplace of marketplaces, and facilitate exchange, like data exchange between exchanges of sorts, kind of like what I've seen happen in the crypto world as well. Behind the scenes on all these smaller exchanges, they kind of all trade liquidity with each other, kind of the
yeah.
same kind of way.
And yeah, so just if I could boil that down, right? Like, so your structure would essentially be you are providing access to this database of data. And you essentially know, okay, there's different kinds of data according to the use cases, so healthcare and I don't know, financial services and other kinds of private data. And what people can do is build bespoke marketplaces on top of those. That utilize that underlying data structure, and because it's public, because it's on mainnet, then you actually know, it's much easier to build Lego blocks on top of those, and those Lego blocks which you build are those marketplaces, and the way value accrues to you, and I am just trying to get that out. The way value accrues to you is every time people use your services, you get a microtransaction or something like that, when when your underlying data store is accessed.
Yeah, we think we're in the, again, we'll see what happens in production, but we believe we have a right to be in the transaction flow itself,
Yeah,
and have a piece of transactions themselves, because we're facilitating that. And so, whether it's a quarter point to a point to two, I don't know yet, what the market will facilitate, and that'll probably be variable depending on the work. I think there's gonna be a lot of human element in the beginning, like figuring out like how all this stuff kind of melds together. Just the goal here is to kind of like get it to a point where it can be repeatable and at scale, because we think it's needed. In healthcare, I think it'll like save lives down the future, and in other industries, facilitate a higher quality product for consumers. So
cool. And yeah, so just to contextualize this a little bit more, right? So I think that the broader theme of what Valence is trying to do, and the space that it's playing in is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially pinning on the fact that there is a wealth of private data out there that people and models would want access to, and you're trying to essentially smooth the road and smooth the path towards these models and these entities gaining access to that data in as transparent a manner as possible.
yeah, exactly. Like a large data aggregator or a consumer company or similar that has sitting on a trove of data. What makes it worth their while to spend product development time to like onboard this? Is it 50 million, 100 million, $1 billion a year? I'm not really sure. It probably depends on the company. But we believe most likely that if positioned correctly, that money is available to onboard the data. So it's not just existing private data sets, but it's to to network everything that already exists. In order to create that like low friction.
Okay, and how do you plan on sourcing this data? How do you plan on, like, what's the, essentially I would say, what's the sales plan, right? Like, how do you plan on building your funnel? So that's one question, and the second one would be great, just to bring this to life a little bit, if you could demonstrate the flow of a transaction, like the flow of how you envision this going with someone actually utilizing this data in to train a model.
Got it. So, sorry, what's the first question again?
Yeah, sorry. The first question was around what's the funnel? Like, how are you essentially going to source all of this data to build up your network of networks?
So, like having built MadHive and this, ad tech company, which is essentially, we aggregate, all the television ads basically in the United States of America and a couple other countries, and as well as data against them. I've doing that for 7 years, kind of understand and it's largely a human effort, and social effort to basically kind of like get people to rally around you. And what really helps in that context there is to have a significant amount of demand as well. So, we're working, we have a partner in healthcare that's working with a few different government agencies to kind of do this kind of thing already in the socialized healthcare countries, things like that there's actually a regulatory reason to get this to happen. And so we're like kind of building up a demand source here to solve certain problems that has downward pressure from a regulatory point of view, and just money for product development to like solve problems like in autism and ALS and things like that. And then and so like kind of with that carrot, essentially it's just kind of old school sales, like let's go talk to, and I have a bunch of access to a lot of those groups from the ad tech world, and experience knowing how to do that. And so that's kind of stage one, is like, hey, I have this big carrot over here, onboard your data safely here, and we'll write you checks. And sometimes that requires money up front, like, hey, and sometimes it doesn't, just depends. It's all deal by deal, and just being kind of smart about that there. I don't think, especially at the enterprise world at this stage, like it's always better to kind of start at the like really, really high end, and then you kind of like get scale. And then as it gets more and more commonplace, then like people onboard themselves at a lower level, but that's probably a couple of years away. So that's how we do that there. And then to answer your other question on like kind of how does it work from a flow point of view, is that there's I'll use ad tech as an example because I think people understand it better. So a demand side platform like MadHive could use this to target television ads in a way, in another way there. So the way it happens today is like, I'm buying media, from a show that people watch online on their computer or Apple TV, whatever like that. And then there's an IP address and other information that can get matched against that. And then there's companies that sell, hey, this person's in market for a car. And the way they figured out they were in market for a car is because like they clicked on a website article about buying a car, in the past month, and then now I can like buy that data. I can buy 1,000 records for like $1, let's say, right? And that's not really high quality just because someone like clicked on a record. Was it the same, if it was the IP address in the household, which member of the household is watching TV? There's a whole bunch of like problems there. That's why it's cheap. And but let's say I wanted to start like layering in more information, like where, let's say it's a company, we want to layer in like one of these, a fitness tracker kind of information there, where, let's say it's a Ferrari, and Ferrari's like, hey, I want to target this ad to people that, like work out and do this kind of stuff and things like that. Theoretically, I could buy data of those people, but it would be better if I can say, hey, I want people who on their fitness tracker have hit 120, over 20 minutes on their heartbeat, in the past week, consistently over the past 6 months. That kind of query, well, it sounds cool and people would want to buy that. And that could happen that could happen like in one-offs by hand, but it wouldn't be able to happen over long term. Because essentially the company that's providing the fitness tracker data, is like they're not going to connect their data set to an ad tech database. But like with this kind of mediating federated technology, they could onboard their data into this thing in a privacy compliant way. We can do the match behind the scenes, but we can also basically, what will happen is that we run that query of heartbeats over 120. Our technology will say that the weight of the fitness tracker data in answering this query was probably at 90%, and 90% of the value of the dollars coming from this campaign and profit should be funneled to the company providing that data. And
perfect.
That's kind of how it works.
That sounds great. And in terms of the payments itself being a blockchain focused podcast, how are you guys doing it? Are you guys using, payments on blockchain rails? Are you using traditional cards? Or like, what's the idea there?
We're not changing. That was one of my learnings is I'm not going to get Fortune 500 companies to pay in ETH or tokens and things like that. So the way that we kind of, that just, we look at the use of our blockchain, which is, an Ethereum-based sidechain. That's a cost center for us the same way like Google Cloud is a cost center, right? Like and
Yeah.
instead of paying Google BigQuery, I'm buying Alice tokens to basically store data on this network. And so, when people pay for this data or access to it, and we're getting remitted checks from, the Ferrari to like get all this together, we then use a big portion of that money to like pay for our cloud infrastructure costs, which happens to be this blockchain network. And so
Yeah.
one of the main missions I have here in the crypto world is I want to drive significant dollars and like, tens of millions a month in the future, hopefully a lot more of new money into these public mainnets that is not based in speculation, but it's based in like public utility need, and rather than giving that to Google, give it back to the community, in that way.
Yeah, and you do that by essentially having traditional Rails accept payments and then abstract away all of the stuff on the background, but doing it yourself to make sure the user experience is as seamless as possible.
Yeah, and there'll be ways to access all this directly, and if like one of these it's not a problem worth solving to get someone to change the way they pay their bills.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not our.
Yeah, no,
I don't.
exactly.
So yeah.
But no, that's a great answer. That's exactly, what you look for in companies that are building, in this side of the cycle where people have learned lessons from what's gone on before, what the mistakes people have made, and how to essentially, the user experience is actually the most important thing. And people have really forgotten that previously. And I think that now, we're starting to get a grip on it again. And at least I've been emboldened a little bit by some of the things that I've seen, the way that people are building now, and how they're prioritizing making things as simple for the end user as possible. And it's great to see that you guys are firmly on that journey as well.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. It's like, is it going to be used or not?
Yeah.
It's like Instagram one, put like the filter button first. Like it's like just little things like that. Just focus on the core value that the product team is building, not the outside stuff. So yeah.
Perfect. No, I think that's great. So yeah, I think it's been a fantastic run through Valence. I'm super excited. I think that your idea is great, and I love talking about data structures, and I think that obviously data is cliched again, but data is the new oil, blah blah blah, and trying to enable that as seamlessly as possible is absolutely fantastic. So thanks so much for walking us through Valence and what you're trying to achieve, and definitely pumping for you on this. But yeah, just in the next few minutes that we have left, I wanted to pick your brains and go back to what I mentioned earlier around, obviously we're on this side of the cycle at the moment, in terms of people building real products, people building things that are actually moving the space forwards. What have you been excited about? What have you seen that in terms of general themes, in terms of projects, in terms of what is being built out there? What are you excited about, and what do you think is genuinely a step change different from what we've seen before?
Yeah, really good question. So I kind of like, since the last kind of boom cycle, I haven't really paid too much attention to like a lot of the smaller projects here, just more, at kind of the overall trends that are happening here. It's like really heads down and doing this kind of stuff. But like the company Block Demon, who's the big node infrastructure company. That's run by a close friend of mine, and I pay close attention there. I do believe an institutional cycle is coming up, and the idea that like governments and major institutions and enterprises around the world, kind of like adopting these like node infrastructure, in order to kind of just track things internally, externally, things like that. I do see that adoption happening, which I think is like kind of needed, this kind of like kind of slow buildup of like, just in case this stuff's a thing and we want to be ready for it, and let's kind of build on it, which kind of makes it inevitable anyway. So I've been seeing a lot of that kind of happening. And then the one thing I have been somewhat paying attention to is like the evolution of the MEV world, and what's happening there, because I think again, that's like implementation or execution of like and like use of like product, the same way that like like a Kim Kardashian uses Instagram to like build $1 billion brand and keeps trying and iterating new ways on this piece of like
Yeah.
internet infrastructure. There's these like mathematicians and basically like traders building these mechanisms on this existing infrastructure to kind of extract and build value from. And then like and since it's such like a cowboy world right now, still in crypto, and it probably always will be to a degree because of its permissionless nature, like how is it self-policing, like how, like what's fair and not fair, and those kind of conversations are really like kind of fascinating to me, like the work that's happening at Flashbots and stuff like that is
Yeah.
that's really what I find the really fascinating stuff going on there. Otherwise a lot of the tech that's happening and new companies building, it's kind of the same thing over and over again to a degree, which is great because it kind of tunes the ideas, whether it's on privacy preserving tech or identity or this or that. I've been reading those same white papers and ideas, since 2016. It's like not
Yeah.
much has changed except the MEV world, and the idea of this massive adoption kind of seems like really important to the future.
Yeah. I
Paying
mean,
attention to that.
yeah, I think that makes quite a lot of sense, and that's a very interesting answer. Yeah, I mean, I've been following what's been happening in that space a little bit as well, and obviously very interested in it. We've written an article about MEV as well, and trying to break it down and trying to see what exactly the developments are in that space, and with a lot of other kind of cutting edge tech, like zero knowledge proofs and configurable privacy preserving protocols, things like that. So yeah, I think these are all foundational building blocks that are being built, and I think that's great. I think it's critical for them to be built up now, actually, so that the infrastructure is there for people to build on over the next few years as well. And yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, and wish we could have had more time on the podcast, honestly, to delve into how you're thinking, about the space, and things like that. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking about Valence, talking about your journey into this space and what you're trying to build, and what you're excited about. And thanks so much, Adam, for joining us on this episode of Genesis Block.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. Have a
Cheers.
wonderful day.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.